What is up? Welcome in. Do it again. Give yourselves that collective pat on the back because you made it to Friday ahead of another absolutely loaded sports weekend. Sorry, we all had to deal with what we had to deal with last night watching Thursday night football, but we made it. And we've got a lot of big games this weekend. A lot of big games. And we've got some games tonight. I wouldn't necessarily call them big games, but we'll get into all of that. We've got so many things to talk about in so little time. The newest Dodger is almost in Dodger blue. A mess in Memphis. And under is the word in the NFL, I think, this week. But what the hell do I know? Because we got whitewashed yesterday. You know, T was smart enough in his 3 picks for Thursday Night Football when he joined me yesterday on this very program to go with Troy Franklin for a touchdown. Touchdowns were a hard thing to come by last night. So were first downs. Penalties, not so much, but we'll get into that. And, of course, it's Friday, so there's going to be a final word. If you're watching along, feel free to comment along. Follow us on all of our social channels, at Mike Arana Show, everywhere but Snapchat, because we're not 12 and Snapchat sucks. T says it way better than me, but he's not here today. So it's me, it's you. It's about 40 minutes of getting us ready for the weekend. I don't even know where to start last night. You know, at least the week prior, we saw the Ravens with Lamar Jackson back in the fold, starting to look like the Ravens. I think a lot of people were interested to see this Denver team last night. I don't think the expectations were very high on the Raiders, and I would even venture to guess that I would, and I don't think a lot of people would disagree with me here on last night's game. I think the Raiders played the better game, top to bottom. You can say what you want about the Raider offense, and I've got questions for Chipper as far as some of that went last night. But 22 penalties, 20 first downs. If you missed the game last night, I probably don't need to tell you much more than that. That's basically what happened. When we dive into this, and I told you guys last week, there's a certain set of stats that I like to focus on. Today, I just decided to print or to screen grab this whole page for you here because it was that damn bad. You know, it's been a long time since we could sit here and watch a Thursday night football game and say we got Thursday nighted. We did last night. The Thursday night games have been really, really good for the most part this year. Seen a lot of upsets. And there was a couple of times during last night's game watching the Denver offense unfold, vomit all over itself, whatever you want to say about what that display was, that I almost went in and a couple of times I was hovering over the Raiders money line there, but the Raiders are on my ban list. And you saw why last night. I don't get it from the Raiders standpoint, some of their offensive decision making last night. Obviously, one of the biggest things that happened to the Raiders last night was the loss of Jackson Powers Johnson. TJ mentioned him when we were doing our season preview show about how valuable he was to this Raiders team and everything he does. Well, they were running before he went out. 43 yards, averaging 4 yards a carry when he was in the game. Going into halftime after he was injured and could not return, -3 yards rushing for the Raiders. You know, it's kind of funny, but to me, there's your player of the game last night. And you're like, who the hell is that guy? That's A.J. Cole of the Raiders. I know he had a punt blocked, but a blocked punt is not always on the punter. This guy had a couple of dimes he dropped down there at the 1 yard line last night. Really gave the Raiders every possible chance you could in flipping field position. And of course, the block punt that leads to the game, what was the game-winning field goal, which at the time you were like, no big deal. It's 10-7. Plenty of time left. No, that was all it took last night. AJ Cole had himself a fine night. I mean, if we're being honest, he was probably the player of the game. Former Gator Jeremy Crawshaw did not have a good night punting the football for Denver. Two of the ugliest punts I've ever seen. I thought that one he shanked off the inside of his foot that went basically straight left like a bad tee shot that we've all hit plenty of times. I thought that was going to hit a dude like one of the gunners in the head. It was brutal. And, you know, again, I think the biggest thing for the Raiders, at least with how they started that game and moving the football on the ground, we'll get to the penalties here in a second, but was the Jackson Powers-Johnson injury. And Denver. I mean, the Denver Broncos continue to just baffle everybody here. There's the Broncos' schedule to this point going into last night. Now, if I told you, what if I told you? You could do an ESPN 30 for 30 on this. Not that you'd be able to see it if you have YouTube TV, but what if I told you that on that list, there's only one time that Denver's actually scored first on that list? And you see how many times there's been wins up there. Happened again last night. Denver is tied, ironically, with Sean Payton's old team, the hapless Saints, for dead last in the NFL at scoring first before their opponents. The only game on that list that they scored first was the game against the Eagles, which they won. It doesn't have to be pretty. We want more in the left column than we want in the right column, and I'll tell you what, Denver is absolutely mastered that skill this year. One time they've scored before their opponents. Good news if you're Denver now, you got one game in the next 23 days. One game in a little NFL scheduling quirk that you will. The Broncos have plenty of time to figure out what in the hell is going on with their offense. Because there's been a couple of times where we're like, okay, now Denver's offense, they're starting to get their sea legs under them, and then they dropped that one out last night. Here's the rest of your schedule for the month of November for the Broncos. November 16th, they host the Kansas City Chiefs in Denver. November 30th, they play at the Washington Commanders, which I believe is a Sunday night football game. That's the rest of the schedule for the month of November for the Broncos. So they got plenty of times to figure out what the hell is wrong with their offense and why it starts so damn slow. You know, the Raiders situation, T and I talked about it yesterday. I mean, we know it's going to take Pete Carroll time. There's Vegas Mac checking in on a Friday. Mr. Uniform Connoisseur loved the uniforms, but I'm sure he thought it was a disgrace to the uniforms last night. The Orange Crush uniforms for the Broncos. I do like the Raiders kind of throwback when they go to the silver letters with the black outlines. But, I mean, this is how we're grasping at straws to try and describe how last night's game went. Las Vegas's D, they showed up to play last night. You know, T joked, and he was kind of joking, but he kind of wasn't. They traded away everybody that could make a tackle. Their defense showed up to play last night. J.K. Dobbins had a solid game. And I don't know about you, but just seeing J.K. Dobbins on the field, I love that. That dude's had every reason to quit and walk away. ACL, Achilles, I mean, you name it. And, I mean, he has been definitely a strong point of Denver's offense to this point in the season. 77 yards on 18 carries last night. But the Raider defense showed up to play last night, and their offense couldn't do a damn thing. You know, Geno Smith, again, running for his life last night, and it got worse after Jackson Powers-Johnson went down. You know, my fiance is kind of half pulling for the Raiders this year. She is a Seahawk fan, which is always interesting when Niners and Seahawks match up in this house. But, you know, she's pulling for the Raiders because she was a Pete Carroll guy. And now the Raiders got Tyler Lockett. And I'll get to Lockett here in a second. But we know Denver brings a ton of pressure. 6 sacks last night, 46 through the season, or 46 through this point on the season. That's their most through 10 games since 1990. But what I'm wondering last night, and I thought maybe we were going to see this, and I talked about the presence of Tyler Lockett in what is an extremely young and inexperienced wide receiver group for the Raiders. And you saw it last night. They were running Lockett on those quick slants, those quick drag routes across the field, couple first downs that they picked up on it. They tried to go to it a couple of times later when Lockett was open and Geno couldn't get the ball out of his hands. Nick Bonino, I mentioned it yesterday. Nick Bonino needs to be in your conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. That guy is a freaking menace. Between Bonito and Allen, great to see Talanoa Hufanga healthy. I loved him when he was with the Niners. The dude is a beast. He's all over the field. I get why the Niners didn't bring him back. Great on Denver to pick him up. Dre Greenlaw, who might be getting a letter from the NFL for piling on late on a hit yesterday, if you saw it, on my guy Trey Tucker. Trey Tucker, who scored a touchdown yesterday, didn't count. Got called back for a penalty. Of course, when Trey Tucker scores, because God forbid I went 1 for 2 in that game last night. I couldn't get anything out of it. Denver's 7th straight win, their longest streak in a decade, their 10th straight home win. And as I mentioned, their next game is on the 16th, 9 days from now, against Kansas City. Denver had more penalties than first downs. 7 3-and-outs in 13 possessions. The second biggest play of the game, maybe the player of the game, wasn't even a player. It was the face mask of J.L. Skinner, who was the one that blocked A.J. Cole's punt to set up the game-winning field goal with his face mask. So there's your MVP of the game, J.L. Skinner's face mask. But yeah, 22 penalties last night, 161 yards combined. And don't worry, guys. You know, we've had good Thursday night games. It's been a good start. We got an old school Thursday night dud from a couple years ago when every Thursday night game sucked. But this should make you excited. Our next Thursday night football game, the Jets at the Patriots. Sorry, I can't sell that to you in any kind of positive light because the Jets are the Jets. I don't even know who's left on the Jets at this point. Can't wait till the draft to see how the Jets screwed up with all those first-round picks. But that's our next Thursday night game, Jets at Patriots. For the Raiders, they're back in action next on Monday Night Football, where they host the Cowboys, because we need the Cowboys on primetime more after last Monday night's deplorable performance. That game is in Las Vegas. Cowboys and Raiders fans in Las Vegas. So what could possibly go wrong there? Denver's next game, as I mentioned, against Kansas City. So we've been lucky. We've been fortunate. We haven't seen a lot of ugly Thursday night games. We got one last night. We could be looking at one the next time we have a Thursday night game. You know, it made me start peeking ahead at the Thursday night schedule. We do have Bills and Texans after Jets Patriots. That could be a good game. It is in Houston. After that, obviously, is Thanksgiving. Packers, Lions, Chiefs, Cowboys, Bengals, Ravens. Because the Bengals, you're already sleeping at that point on Thursday night football, the night game on Thanksgiving. That one will definitely put you to sleep. Then after that, of course, the Cowboys with their double Thursdays. Prime time again for the Cowboys as they travel to Detroit to take on the Lions. Falcons and Bucks, that'll be a Thursday night snooze fest. Rams and Seahawks, December 18th. And where will that game go in determining the final standings in what is a crazy NFC West, at least the top 3 teams? I mean, you can add the Cardinals to the mix. That adds crazy, but a different kind of crazy there. So we could be looking at some rough weeks here coming up on Thursday night football. Let's hope not, but it is what it is. We've got some interesting divisional matchups this weekend, and there's 3 divisional matchups that I've kind of got my eyeballs on for this week specifically. And you know me, if you followed the show long enough, I'm not a big fan of betting unders. Because to me, when you have unders, it's not an enjoyable way to watch a football game. Case in point, last night, divisional game. A lot of people were on the under. That one cruised easily last night. We see these divisional games, especially as we get into this point in November. You know, the weather cools off. Injuries, obviously a big part of what's going on. And there's 3 divisional games this weekend that I like for under targets. Well, starts with an AFC East divisional matchup between the Bills and the Dolphins. This will be round 2 for the Bills and Dolphins this year. Kickoff at 11 a.m. here in Arizona, 10 o'clock on the West Coast, 1 o'clock on the East Coast. The Bills, who, I don't know. We've talked about the depth of the AFC here and how it's kind of anybody's game. And I got a text last night from a very good friend that literally said, apparently Denver's got problems like the rest of us. This really good friend happens to be a Bills fan. Yeah, and I responded to him with the laughing face emoji, I think 7 times. Denver's problem is the first 30 minutes of every game. So Jets and Dolphins, 31-21 when they played earlier this season. So 52 points there. Game on the road. Obviously, the Dolphins have moved off of a couple of playmakers with the trade deadline. Most notably, Jalen Phillips. Because let's just let good players just get traded to the Eagles every year, and we wonder why the Eagles are still in the mix at the end of every season. But this Miami team, like we said, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. I think from their game in week 3 that Buffalo definitely won't take them lightly. And we've seen Miami's defense. Now, this could be different now that we're missing some playmakers there. But we've seen Miami's defense actually show up to play, much like the Raider defense did last night to keep them in a game. When I looked at this game and I saw that the total, when I jumped on it, was 50.5 was your over-under on this one. Again, 52 points in their earlier meeting in Buffalo. But these divisional games, especially the second time through divisional games later in the year, Buffalo is on the road. I could see this game being a 37-10 type of game. Not expecting a ton from Miami's offense. I think we'll see James Cook have good success on the ground. And I'm really just in my head trying to figure out what can the Dolphins bring to the table. Well, if the Dolphins bring 14 points to the table, I can count on the Bills to bring probably 30 to the table. I'm going to play the game under. Next one, we go to a place that's not been kind to the Cardinals, Seattle. And it's Jacoby Brissett's Cardinals. The total on this game, 45.5. When we talk about teams and what they do well and what they don't do well, we saw Sam Darnold last week absolutely carve up the Commanders' defense. You can say what you want about the Commanders' defense. Seattle's problem, consistently running the football. What does Arizona do pretty well on defense? Prevent you from running the football. Now, can they stop Sam Darnold and the Seahawks offense, which just added another absolute speedster in Rashid Shaheed in the trade from New Orleans? I don't know. Can Jacoby Brissett move the football effectively on what I think might be the best defense in the NFL right now? Probably not. Playing that game under 45.5. And then the third one of the trio of divisional unders, and TJ talked about this on Wednesday. A lot of Niner-Rams games typically end up going over. Ironically, the point total on this one, 49.5. At Levi's Stadium North this week in a battle, again, for the top of the NFC West. Mac Jones against the Rams on Thursday Night Football when the Niners went down there and beat the Rams. Walking wounded. He had left side issues. He had right knee issues. The dude got his ass kicked in that game and was able to get the 49ers a victory. Can the 49er defense slow down the Rams passing attack? A lot of people on the Matt Stafford for MVP train I can see it. I don't see it happening, but I can see it. But I think you're going to see another divisional game that's in that 20-17 kind of range, real tight. We know for the most part that in the regular season, Kyle Shanahan is Sean McVay's daddy. But I think with just the general construction of the Niners defense, you're a little bit worried here. Can they slow down the passing attack? Because as T mentioned this week, and Max said it a few times, Devontae Adams and Matthew Stafford really starting to get a roll together. Obviously, Puka Nacua, when he's on the field, highly effective. But then there's the anomaly, and Mac, I think, pointed this out very, very well when we did trust issues on Tuesday. We flipped it on you guys. Trust issues, teams that we actually trust. And Mac brought up the 49ers because they continue to just find random ass ways to win games. There's something to be said for that. And if you pull the camera back and you look from a wide angle at the Niners situation, I think the Niners are very cognizant of the fact that they have a leg up on everybody in the division. They're 3-0 in the division. If they can manage to win that division and put themselves in a position where they have the tiebreaker over Seattle and Los Angeles specifically, that's going to be a huge key. We know Seattle struggles with the Rams, just like the Cardinals struggle with Seattle. I like that game to go under 49.5. So under 50.5, Buffalo and Miami, under 45.5 with Arizona and Seattle, and under 49.5 with the Rams and the Niners. Of course, on Sunday morning, we will have the Sunday spread. It will be out early because it does involve the game in Germany between the Jekyll and Hyde Falcons and Indiana Jones and the Colts. Can you trust Atlanta for any reason right now? Atlanta's a lot like, to me, Atlanta is Max Jacksonville Jaguars, to me. Some days they look like they could, be a really formidable team in the NFC. And then other days you're like, what the hell are they doing out there? Some interesting spots this weekend when you go through this week's NFL schedule. And there's other divisional games, but I'm going to be honest with you right now. I'm not touching the Saints and Panthers game at all. The Panthers, who are very much kind of in a mix for maybe grabbing one of those last playoff spots in the NFC, believe it or not. Jaguars and Texans, no CJ Stroud. What Jaguars team shows up? We never know that answer either. And of course, the game of the weekend, the Browns and the Jets. Talking about things that'll hurt your eyes, Browns and Jets, definitely a qualifier there. A couple of injury news and notes. The biggest of which that involves any of the major games this weekend. New England is again going to be without Kayshon Boutte and without Ramondre Stevenson as they travel to Tampa to take on the Bucs. We know about the Bucs injury situation. A really sneaky good game. Right now, most up-to-date that I have is Tampa Bay minus 2.5. Your over-under on that game, 48.5. So a lot of interesting stuff as far as the situation goes in both the AFC and the NFC. And Denver now sits as the only 8-win team in the NFL atop the AFC. Colts and Patriots can move into a tie with them at 8-2 with wins this week. And then you've got kind of this conundrum, if you will, in the AFC. You've got 5-3 Pittsburgh, 6-2 Buffalo, 6-3 Los Angeles, 5-3 Jacksonville, 5-4 Kansas City. And then, as shitty as this sounds, the Texans at 3-5 and the Ravens at 3-5 still in that mix. When you flip over the NFC side of the table, you've got the three-way tie at the top between Philly, Tampa, and Seattle, all at 6-2. Green Bay at 5-2-1. Who knows what the hell they are? By the way, the Eagles are still plus money dogs. Monday Night Football in Green Bay. Just throwing that out there. I jumped on it. Did you watch Jordan Love last week against the Panthers? Now they have no Tucker Kraft for the rest of the season. Their leading receiver. And we've talked about this a lot. How much of it is on Jordan Love? How much of it is on a young, undeveloped receiving core in Green Bay? And they got the Eagles coming to town. Obviously, there's the side drama, LaFleur and Sirianni with the tush push. But then you look at the rest of the NFC, same situation. 6-2 Rams, 6-3 Niners, 5-3 Lions, 5-3 Bears. I'm going to will that damn team to the playoff. If I have to, I will will the Bears to the playoffs because seeing TJ in his Caleb Williams jersey will bring so much joy at a holiday time of joy to both Mac and myself to see TJ have to don a Caleb Williams Bears jersey. And like I said, the Panthers at 5-4, very much in the mix still. Do I think they're going to the playoffs? No. But they're in the mix. We laid out the situation. They could have to go through Baker, Darnold, and Baker if they get to the end of the season in a playoff spot. That could be the road that they have to go through. Two of their former quarterbacks to get into the postseason. So this is the great time of the year for the NFL, man, because you really get to start to see who's gonna make some noise and who's not. So plenty of stuff to keep an eye on this week. And obviously, Mac will have Sunday Night Mac 5 for 500 back this week. Again, our quest for a 300-yard passer, a 100-yard rusher, and a 100-yard receiver shouldn't be that hard. Apparently it is. Let's look at some Friday night lights, shall we? College football, as we get into a key time for college football. Not the greatest trio of games tonight, if we're being perfectly honest. Tulane and Memphis. Memphis knows they're in the driver's seat for that group of 5 bid now because we've seen the first edition of the college football playoff rankings. 2 teams that can score. Tulane, a team a lot of people thought was going to get that group of 5 berth at the beginning of the year. But I think it's Tulane's defense that is the problem child here. But I'm going to tell you why I'm going to pull a Vegas Mac here and be Switzerland on this game in just a second. Both of these teams can score. Memphis sees the road paved in front of them perfectly. Here's the problem. As we found out yesterday, it is most likely and rumored that Memphis coach Ryan Silverfield will be taking the Arkansas job at the end of the year. It is not confirmed yet, but it is basically confirmed from what we heard yesterday. And I'll be honest with you, for what Arkansas has on the table, what other jobs are open, I think that's as good as you could hope for Arkansas if they end up getting pen to paper. Gus Malzahn, the offensive coordinator at Florida State, a staff that could be completely done at the end of this season. He's another guy that's going to be out. And if you look at what Florida State, for the most part, has been able to do on offense this year, I'd like to see Gus get another shot. Maybe Auburn can bring him back. Everybody in Auburn going, you shut your mouth right now. But here's the other part of this game that makes it kind of a no play for me. John Summerall, the head coach at Tulane, also on the short list for many jobs, an up-and-coming guy. So what do we get here out of this game? Does the news from yesterday about Silverfield, is it enough of a distraction for Memphis? I'd say if they weren't playing Tulane, maybe. If they were on the road, maybe. If this game was at Tulane, I would probably like Tulane. But I'm staying off of this game completely. You see the numbers at 3.5 for Memphis. They're over under at 54.5. Sometimes, as much as you want action, it's just best to stay away, and I think that game defines it 100% there for me. There's too much uncertainty with the head coaches there. You got to remember, even in this day and age of NIL, I think even more so in this day and age of NIL, when you're hearing ahead of the end of the season that your coach could be gone, sometimes you tend to check out. And I think there's too much there for me to really like a side. I do like a couple of sides in a couple other spots. Houston at UCF. Houston, who just got absolutely smashed last week. you know, I think there's some value here on the spread for Houston if Houston plays like we've seen them play all year. UCF, Scott Frost is back. It's going to take a while to get them back where he wants them and where he once had them a couple years ago with their fake national championship. But 45 points Houston gave up last week, and they completely could not stop the run game for West Virginia, who's not very good. I know, that's breaking news. West Virginia, not very good. It's going to take Rich Rod some time to get that thing figured out. But Houston could not stop the run game last week whatsoever. That being said, they've been really good at stopping the run all season long, other than last week. They're undefeated on the road this season. They've scored 24 points in every single game but one. They've scored 31 points in 3 of their last 4 games. They've hit the over in each of those games. They have a 6-3 over record, averaging 29.4 points per game themselves. So I have a slight lean tonight because UCF's defense has allowed at least 27 points in 3 of their last 5 games, and they've scored at least 20 in 5 of their last 7. If you can do the math on the fly here, you get where I'm going. Over 47.5 in that one, I think, is the play. I don't trust either team on a side there. But I think Houston's going to carry the bulk of the scoring load tonight, and I think UCF will give us enough to get it over 47.5. And then a big one. And when you look at the two combatants here, you wouldn't say a big one. But this is a Northwestern team, and I'll give T credit for pointing this out because this was part of his Saturday, our first ever head-to-head Saturday here, as we talked about on yesterday's program. This Northwestern defense is really, really good. Well, we know the USC offense is one of the best in the country. Jaden Mayava, man. Kid can sling it. But we saw this, and I mentioned it yesterday. The boys, Will Compton, Taylor Lewan with Josh Pate and their show that they do on, I believe it's on Wednesdays. And Josh Pate said, keep an eye on Lincoln Riley and the situation at USC. A lot of jobs open. Lincoln hasn't gotten over the hump. He's scared to play Notre Dame on a regular basis. It's a USC team that likely is not going to the postseason. Has not had a lot of success under Lincoln Riley. Maybe he's got 1 foot in the SEC and 1 foot in Los Angeles. 14.5, I'm all over that for Northwestern. Because I think their defense can turn this into a grinded out kind of game. A lot of people indifferent right now on the point total here. Over or under. And we're at 50.5. I'm going under in this game because of Northwestern's defense. 7 o'clock kick, Friday night, conference game. This Northwestern defense, they can bring it, man. And I think they're gonna have some success in slowing down USC's highly prolific offense. And again, Jaden Mayava, about as good as it gets. If Lincoln Riley leaves, what happens to Jaden Mayava? That's something to take into account here in this new day and age of college football. So that's your Friday night lights. Again, obviously we have some big games this weekend on the college football slate now that we know everybody's initial positioning in the college football playoff rankings. We've got Indiana on the road at Penn State. I think you can pretty much figure out how that one's going to go. Georgia at Mississippi State. This is a game we talked about the other day. Georgia and their propensity, like the Denver Broncos, to start games at a snail's pace. And Kirby Smart said it good, I think nailed it a couple weeks ago, and who knows this team better than Kirby Smart does. They've got a lot of young guys in key positions. It would be nice not to have games come down to the end. Well, if you start slow in Stark Vegas, that's not an easy place to come back from. I'm not saying it doesn't happen because we've seen it happen this year, but that's not a place you want to get off to a slow start. Of course, the big one in the morning, I'll have some extended thoughts on this tomorrow. BYU and Texas Tech. This spread is still Texas Tech minus 10.5 in a lot of places, which I can't get for the life of me why it's like that. Yeah, BYU coming off bye week. I think the events that took place last weekend couldn't have happened any better for BYU. But here we are. We've got two teams smack dab in the middle of the initial college football playoff rankings. And I think if you're all the teams, as we've talked about in the Big 12, that are chasing to try and get into that Big 12 title game, you're pulling for BYU here because it hangs another loss on Texas Tech. You want BYU to win out because that'll hang another loss on Cincinnati. We could have another crazy tie situation at the Big 12 at the end of the year. Ohio State's at Purdue in the morning. Ole Miss with a tough one against the Citadel. Texas A&M, I think, a little bit of a tricky spot for them at Missouri. I don't think a Mike Elko team comes into any game not focused. And then Oregon and Iowa in the middle of the day. Auburn, their first game without their head coach. The coach firing bump, is it enough to let them hang with Vanderbilt in Nashville? Washington and Wisconsin. Luke Fickell's coming back. Don't think any of us saw that one. But I kind of like this because I took Wisconsin plus the 11.5 in this game before we heard that Luke Fickell's coming back. You imagine if Wisco goes through the rest of this season and doesn't win a game and they end up 2-10, selling that to your fan base? Hey, we know he was 2-10 this year, but he's coming back next year. Apparently a promise of more NIL dollars for the Badgers. Kind of risky to look at the rest of their schedule, and you're potentially bringing back a coach that could finish this season 2-10. That's a tough sell. Even leading the country in alcohol sales at your games, that's still a tough sell. We don't have a ton on the night slate. I mean, LSU and Alabama, but has there ever been an LSU and Alabama game that's been less talked about than this one? LSU, first game without their head coach. Is it enough to bump? Bama's favored by 10.5. You're over under at 49.5 there. And then a sneaky good game at night. Navy and Notre Dame. And we've talked about this in Notre Dame's path back to the postseason. And they had to win out. Same position they were in last year. Not a lot of tricky games on their schedule. If you have not watched Navy play this year, Blake Horvath, their quarterback, really good. And when you look at what's left for the Irish on their schedule, they do have a game next week at number 24 Pitt. Then they have Syracuse. Then they have Stanford. This is likely the last potential trip-up spot for Notre Dame in their path to returning to the postseason. I think the events of last week couldn't have helped BYU more. I also think that they couldn't have helped Notre Dame more, as Notre Dame comes into the rankings at number 10. That's an interesting game. That is TJ's After Dark game, which will go out on our channels around midday on Saturday, tomorrow here. So, big weekend on the college football slate as well. And that takes us to the NBA before we get out of here on a Friday. And tell me if you've heard this one before, but Memphis has a Ja Morant problem. Career low 30 minutes per game, as I alluded to this morning. He's shooting 38% from the field, 14% from three. And had some very choice things to say about the Grizzlies coaching staff, which has led to a one-game suspension that looks like he will serve on Sunday. Tell me if you've heard this one before. Somebody asked Ja Morant if he has any joy in playing basketball right now, and he said, quote, no. The last guy that lost his joy got sent from Miami to Golden State and really kind of changed the trajectory of where Golden State was at the time. But he's at a career low now, 30 minutes a game, on his third head coach in Memphis. Now, nobody's really saying anything about this, and all the higher-ups within the Grizzlies organization are choosing not to say anything and trying to handle the situation internally. And this kind of comes after a reshaping of the Grizzlies roster in where they threw all their chips into Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant being the cornerstones of this new version of the Grizzlies. Personally, I can't wait till realignment comes in the NBA and the Grizzlies are where they should have been from step one in the Eastern friggin' Conference. But this is an interesting spot here for Memphis. Now, they've said they have zero intention of trading Ja Morant. Well, it's an interesting spot because in the current landscape of the NBA, where we have aprons and tax penalties and all this stuff because of a couple of things that Ja Morant has done that led to suspensions before, his contract is a little more tradable than you think it is. So instead of having a cap hit of $47 million this season, 50 and 53 the next 2 years, Ja Morant, because he wasn't able to get the 5-year, $197 million extension because he didn't qualify and have enough votes in games played for all NBA, he's 39, 42, and 44 over the next 3 years is what he's owed. There's 3 years left on his contract. He is eligible to sign a 3-year, $178 million max extension next summer. But his salary ranks 28th amongst the players in the NBA. So you go, okay, maybe Memphis just decides we've had enough. It's time to move him. There's not many teams you can move him to. Who needs a point guard right now? Minnesota? They don't have assets to send to Memphis that would get you a Ja Morant. Phoenix always needs a point guard. They don't have any assets because of dumb moves that they've made within their organization. The Nets in Brooklyn, they have plenty of draft capital, plenty of assets to move. But does Ja Morant fit their version 5.0 of the Brooklyn Nets rebuilding plan? No. This leads me to one team that I think if anybody is going to acquire Ja Morant and Memphis finally says, hey, we're done with this circus, watch out for the Rockets. If you've seen the video floating around on social media, Houston playing Memphis, KD giving it to Ja's dad at half court, saying your son don't even want to be here. This is going to be your last weekend here. You don't know where it's going to be. Very fun exchange, actually. But we know the Rockets went all in with everything and kind of reshaped their franchise. They have a ton of assets. They have a need at point guard because of the Fred VanVleet injury. I'm just saying, if there's a team that could make a move and it makes sense, even if it's in the short term, you imagine putting Ja Morant on that Rockets team? I don't know if there'd be enough basketballs to go around, but I think that's something that you have to kind of pay attention to here. Because if this thing deteriorates even more in Memphis, if you're the Grizzlies, you have to get to a point where it's like, hey, enough's enough. What does that do to Jaren Jackson? Who knows? But here's an interesting thing that I saw. And if you're reshaping your franchise around Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., one would think that those guys play heavy minutes every night. Minutes per game with Morant and JJJ on the court. In 24-25, they played 21 and a half minutes a game together on the court. Desmond Bane is out. They reshaped everything. These are our two cornerstones, Morant and Jackson Jr. Well, this year, with them being the definite two cornerstones of the Grizzlies, Thomas Isalo and his staff have them playing 14.6 minutes per game on the court together, which is down basically 7 minutes a game from last season. So do we really understand and have any clue what we're actually doing in Memphis? Because it doesn't sound like it. If these were the two guys that were supposed to be the cornerstone of your franchise going forward, why are they not on the court together? So I think there's plenty of blame to go around in Memphis, and that's going to be something to pay attention to. But that'd be like the equivalent of the Warriors saying, hey, we just got Jimmy Butler to pair with Steph and Draymond, but we're barely going to play Butler and Steph on the floor at the same time together. Or the Lakers not playing Luka and LeBron at the same time together when LeBron comes back after he's done monitoring the situation in Los Angeles. Telling you, call it a hunch, but I really, really think the Rockets are a team to watch if Ja Morant is moved out of Memphis. Something to keep in mind and could make the Rockets extremely dangerous. The NBA Cup is back tonight. Of course, here's the look at a couple of the highlighted crappy courts that you'll see tonight with Atlanta, Denver, and Miami having home games again. I doled those down for you because when I first put them into this little graphic here to show them next to each other, it was blinding to my eyes. So those are dumbed down. But an interesting night on the NBA hardwood, as we've got NBA Cup play back in action. The Nuggets will be the second part of the Prime Video NBA doubleheader tonight as they host the Warriors. The first game of the Prime Video doubleheader tonight is Rockets and Spurs from San Antonio. So NBA Cup action in full swing tonight. Very interesting one in the East. The 6-1 Bulls. My Bulls with the direction. Josh Giddey almost averaging a triple-double for the Bulls. They're in Milwaukee to take on the Bucks. Two plays I like in the NBA. Last Friday I gave you the Bulls on the money line. They were able to get it done. Great game. Giannis Antetokounmpo tonight. Over 44.5 points and rebounds. Bruce Brown of the Nuggets, over 3.5 rebounds. Bruce Brown has been a rebounding machine for the Nuggets this season. And you're going to have to wait till we get closer to game time because not really sure who's going to be wearing a uniform for the Warriors tonight. Denver favored by 9.5 at home against a Warrior team that they just lost to a couple of weeks ago. But again, as we know, especially early in the season with the NBA, not really sure who's going to be in uniform for the Warriors tonight. And that leads us, of course, on a Friday to our final thoughts for the week. And they go back to a place where we left our final thoughts for last week. YouTube TV and ESPN. The Google Disney battle that is affecting the people that matter most, sports fans. We're still getting messages from, I found out we're getting them on local radio, local sports radio the other day. Driving around, popped on one of the local stations, and I was being told by more people to go to keepmynetworks.com. It is not my job to fix your pissing contests. But now we're looking at a second, basically, week of this. And 3 of Disney's top executives distributed a memo. This is by Andrew Marchand and Dan Shanoff of The Athletic. They distributed a memo to employees Friday laying out the company's perspective on ESPN's standoff with YouTube TV over distribution rights in a signal that the network remains pessimistic about a resolution, because that's what we all wanted to hear as sports fans. Even with the prospects of 10 million YouTube TV subscribers missing out on another college football weekend and Monday Night Football for the second straight week. The memo goes on to say, quote, rather than compete on a level playing field, Google's YouTube TV has approached these negotiations as if it were the only player in the game. It goes without saying that the reason so many consumers value our programming above others, this is ESPN's words, is because we invest in the best talent, creators, and content in the world, and we cannot allow anyone to undercut our ability to do so. So how does that affect you as a sports fan this weekend? Well, BYU Texas Tech, the site of College Game Day. That game on ABC. LSU and Alabama in prime time. That game on ESPN. And what is, let's call it what it is, one of the best matchups on Monday Night Football of the season. Eagles at Packers. Apparently, this memo laid out deal points that Disney has said it's offered, including fair terms that are in line with more than 500 other distributors that have renewed their agreements since last summer, including the top distributors who are far larger than YouTube TV. YouTube TV continues to insist on receiving preferential terms that are below market value and has made few concessions. Here's the flip side, to be fair here. Not that I feel like I need to be fair to two massive media titans whatsoever. A spokesperson for YouTube TV had this response. Once again, Disney is resorting to their old tactics like leaking documents to the press, negotiating in public through their paid talent, and misrepresenting the facts, including from the deals they've offered and taking credit for our product proposals. Our team, Google, YouTube TV, stands ready to make a fair agreement in line with their deals with other distributors, and we encourage Disney to come to the table and do what's best for our mutual customers. Really? Because as a YouTube TV subscriber, I was given an email that said, if this stalemate goes over a lengthy period of time, a temporary $20 credit will be given for the inconvenience to YouTube TV customers. Well, I don't know about you what constitutes an inconvenience for the general public, but a second straight weekend of not having access to some of the biggest and best games that are out there would constitute a lengthy and disruptive process. So where's my $20? Again, do I have options outside of it? Yes, I do. I honestly, last weekend was the first time that I actually utilized the ESPN new app called ESPN in its full form. And I will say this, it was kind of neat because when a game ended on the multi-view, it automatically put another game up, and then it automatically shifted my multi-view to 3 of 4. It's kind of cool the first time I was playing around with it last weekend. I told you, you have options here. Sign up for a free trial of something that has the ESPN networks. Maximize your free trial, and when it gets to the end of your free trial, cancel it. The shitty part of it, for lack of a more descriptive term, because it's shitty, is I'm sure at this point a lot of people would have probably just said, you know what, the hell with it, and canceled YouTube TV. But if you're an NFL fan, you can't do that because you need YouTube TV to watch Sunday Ticket, as we all know. So it really does kind of leave everybody in that position. Where's my $20, damn it? I love the fact, and I know there's a definitive line here in sports fans that love Pat McAfee or can't stand Pat McAfee. I know which side I sit on. I think what Pat's doing is great for the changing game of sports media. Spaces like this. And I love the fact that he came out and said, hey, can we get together for the sports fans here? Stop telling me to go to this website to do this. It's ridiculous. Don't tell us what to do. Fix the problem. Because you guys can sit here and piss and moan about, you know, who's negotiating in the public and who's negotiating under fair tactics, and you can throw your little word barbs at each other. But here's the reality of the situation. all you holier than thou Google people and all you holier than thou Disney people are going to go get in your fancy sports cars and get on your yachts and enjoy a weekend. While the rest of the people, your consumers, the sports fans, sit here and try and scramble to figure out ways to get things done. Personally, I can't see this going past another set of Monday Night Football, but from reading between the tea leaves here, it doesn't sound like we're getting any closer to a resolution. So again, F the fans. That's a wise business strategy. But like I told you last week, they don't care about us. Because all these people that are affected by this, the decision makers for this, aren't going to sit down at the negotiating table all friggin' weekend. They're going to be out in the Hamptons. They're going to be on their yachts. Come out to the coast, have a few laughs. Some people don't even get that reference. They don't care about you. So best of luck to everybody trying to scramble this weekend. Personally, if it passes another set of Monday Night Football, especially with Eagles-Packers on Monday night, I would say buckle up for something that's probably not going to get resolved anytime soon. If you're going to pass the NFL's biggest brand in the Dallas Cowboys, whether the Cowboys suck or not, you can sit here and tell me they're not the biggest brand. The Cowboys are the biggest brand in the NFL. Chiefs fans are like, what about us? Because Chiefs fans want credit for everything, including like not understanding you can be manhandled in a game that you only lose by 7 points. I digress. I wish everybody the best of luck. Again, sign up for your free trials. Until they take free trials away, that's what a free trial is. When you go to cancel, you're going to click cancel. They're going to go, can we ask why you canceled? Well, you don't have the ESPN networks. What if we offered you this? Well, you don't have the ESPN networks. And then you move to something else. That's the way we can fight back, if you want to call it that. If it goes past Monday Night Football, I think this thing's dig in for a long fight of billionaire decision makers who really don't care about the people that help them become billionaires. But what else is new? So plenty of stuff. The Big Mac kickoff tonight on our social networks. Oregon and Iowa, big game from Iowa City. A lot of people calling for the Ducks to lose this one. Interested to see where Vegas Mac goes on that one. I'll have more thoughts on BYU Texas Tech tomorrow. After dark, Navy and Notre Dame. And of course, our typical on Sunday, we'll have the Sunday spread, which will be out at the ass crack of prior to dawn, because it does involve the Colts and the Jekyll and Hyde Falcons from Germany. Thankfully, we only have one more week of these kind of games. And what a way to send off the international audience than to, I believe this is the last one, the following week, which is from Madrid, and will feature the Marcus Mariota Commanders against maybe still Tua's Dolphins. That's the next week in Madrid. So plenty of stuff to go around. Despite billionaire pissing contests, it is going to be a loaded weekend of sports. There are some great games in the NHL as we outlined tomorrow on the slate. Obviously the college football slate, and it's positioning time in the NFL. We've got two conference races that are about as wide open as I can remember any year being at this point. Usually there's a couple of teams where we go, yep, that's a Super Bowl team. I don't think right now you could make a bad bet picking any one of probably the top 10 to 12 teams to win the Super Bowl. What do we see over the next couple of weeks? We will find out. So for everybody behind the scenes, for my two co-pilots, TJ and Vegas Mac, we will be back in these spaces 5:30 on the West Coast on Tuesday, reacting to another weekend in college football and the NFL, as well as the NBA, the NHL. We've also got college hoops in full swing. Don't have any plays for you. I try and take it easy the first couple of weeks of the college basketball season because there is so much unknown, as we've talked about, especially in college basketball. But you've got a good one tonight between Kansas and North Carolina. I do lean a little bit to the heels on this one, but again, I try and stay off of a lot of college basketball here early in the season. You've also got another big game tomorrow as it pertains to the top 25, which is ridiculous at the beginning of the year. But this is a good one from the Mecca, from Madison Square Garden, as Alabama will take on St. John's on Saturday as well. So you got a loaded weekend. Again, for everybody behind the scenes, for Vegas Mac and TJ, I'm Mike. We'll be back in this space on Tuesday. Enjoy your weekend, however you're going to watch it. You know the drill. We're out.